2, 1.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's industry series focused on Houston being a growing hub of digital technology and innovation. We're going to take just a slight pause and make sure that everybody's able to join. Alrighty. Again, thank you for joining us. Before we begin today's program, let's take a moment for some regular housekeeping tips. If you're joining via computer or mobile, you'll be able to view and hear today's speakers, but you'll not have audio or screen sharing as all attendees are muted and the videos are turned off for the entirety of the webinar. If you note the controls at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat feature. You can use the chat feature for submitting comments or any technical difficulties. Towards the end of today's event, there'll be some time for audience Q&A. All questions should be directed to the Q&A tab that you'll notice at the bottom of your screen. So please use this feature to submit any questions for the speakers, and we'll try to answer those questions during this live event. Lastly, today's webinar will be recorded and made available to for your viewing within our member portal tomorrow. Alrighty, with that, I'll get started with introductions. So my name is Krisha Tracy. I'm with Google Cloud, focused on sustainability and driving and delivering digital solutions. Google's been engaged with the City of Houston for several years now using Google's Environment Insights Explorer, which has calculated Houston's solar projects or calculated Houston's solar potential for the city. And has calculated that around 5 million megawatt hours based off of the rooftops and community solar projects targeted for 2050. This gives the City of Houston better insights into how to attain the goal of being carbon neutral by 2050, and also will generate more than 1,000 jobs, further positioning the city as a global energy transition leader. So we continue to engage with the city to build more sustainable and to build a more sustainable and resilient Houston through innovation and digital technology solutions. However, there's a substantial need for many more technology solutions as we embark on this energy transition, as well as in other industries. And also, Houston holds a wealth of resources, transferable expertise, and community support to lead in a cleaner, more efficient, and more sustainable, lower carbon world. So as the legacy industries that you'll find here in Houston digitize, tech companies from around the world are finding that Houston can offer unique access to customers and talent. Today, Houston's tech economy includes 236,000 workers and contributes $28 billion to the regional GDP. Houston has been a center for innovation for over a century, with science and engineering breakthroughs ingrained in the fabric of our economy. While the region may be best known for world-changing innovations in energy, healthcare, and aerospace, Houston has become a thriving hub of digital technology talent and rapid technological developments. In recent years, the region has been dedicated to further strengthening our digital tech and innovation ecosystems. This includes working to ensure our region offers access to key talent, funding, and customers, along with a support network of mentors, accelerators, and incubators to help companies grow. To support the growth of early stage startups, notable national accelerators have been flocking to Houston, including Plug and Play, Mass Challenge, Capital Factory, and most recently, Greentown Labs. Today, the region is home to a growing base of over 500 successful venture-backed startups. In 2019, these emerging companies raised $600 million in venture capital a new record for the region. The steady growth in the volume of venture capital funding over the past 5 years is a sign that Houston's tech ecosystem is definitely maturing. With us today to discuss national innovation trends and how the Houston region offers access to talent, funding, and customers, along with a support network of mentors, accelerators, and incubators to help companies grow. So we have a very exciting lineup of speakers on today's agenda, and we'll run. So let's get started, and I'll pass over each of our panelists to give introductions. On our panel, we have Stephanie Campbell with Artemis Venture Fund. We have John Nordby with Mass Challenge, and we have Paya Patel with Plug and Play Tech Center. So I'll pass it over. Let's get started with Stephanie, if you will.
Thank you, Krisha. Very excited to be here, and thanks for all the panels for participating and GHP for putting this together. So my name is Stephanie Campbell. I am the Managing Director of the Houston Angel Network. I'm also the General Partner and Co-Founder of the Artemis Fund. So at the Angel Network, we have grown, actually, is also a testament to the interest in venture capital, from 60 to 120 members over the last 2 years. There's a very strong and renewed interest in investors looking for talent and tech companies in Houston. At the same time I became Managing Director, I also founded the Artemis Fund, because one of the things that we wanted to do in Houston was attract a diverse group of founders. And so we set out to raise a venture fund. We invest in women-led tech companies all over the United States, and hope that we'll attract more females to start companies in Houston and to move to Houston, which is a great market for a tech company.
That's fantastic, Stephanie. Thank you. I'll pass it over to you, Payal.
Thanks so much, Krisha, and thank you so much to the Greater Houston Partnership for inviting me to this event. I am Payal Patel. I'm Director of Plug and Play's Houston office. For those of you who may not know Plug and Play, we are a very unique business. We are a very active early stage technology investor. We invest out of our CEO's family office, deploying anywhere from $30 to $50 million a year. And then we also run industry-themed accelerator programs all over the world in our 30 offices that we operate in. In Houston, we launched with our energy vertical, but we have ambitions to expand to healthcare, supply chain, et cetera, as we gain traction. And thanks again for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Payal. John, we'll pass over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Krisha. Great to be seen, everyone. Thanks for having me, Great Houston Partnership. So I'm John Nordby, Managing Director of Mass Challenge here in Houston. We are an early stage accelerator. Really, though, our mission is to solve massive challenges by building innovation ecosystems. We do that by curating really high quality expert pools, and then orienting those expert pools of that knowledge base to things like our seed stage accelerator, which we run here in Houston. We also have an industry focus that we do through these accelerators as well. And I should mention that very happy to be here because my previous experience bringing Mass Challenge to Houston was with the Great Houston Partnership and Houston Exponential. So I've been really thrilled to be a part of this innovation ecosystem for a number of years and watch it grow and expand. So happy to be here.
All right, fantastic. Thank you each for your introductions. So we're going to get started with focusing a little bit on the ecosystem of support and growth of early stage startups. Notable national accelerators have been expanding to Houston, including Plug and Play and Mass Challenge. So Payal, I'll direct the first question to you. Can you speak a bit about the decision that Plug and Play made to expand into Houston and your experience working with startups in the region?
Yeah, sure. I am very thankful to the mayor of Houston and other city leaders for kind of setting up my job for me. In early 2019, the Greater Houston Partnership actually led a trade delegation to Silicon Valley. They visited our headquarters in Sunnyvale and saw what Plug and Play has done in Silicon Valley, and the mayor of Houston actually invited us to open up an office here. So we did a feasibility study. What we're really good at is deploying early stage capital, writing, let's say, $200,000 checks to founders for their seed stage investment. And we also are very good at working with industry partners. We work with over 400 Fortune 5,000 type of companies all over the world. Houston has the second highest concentration of Fortune 1000 companies in the world. So we saw an opportunity of making lots of early stage investments, but also partnering with industry to run these accelerator programs. So it was kind of just a perfect fit. And then in terms of experience working with entrepreneurs here, like John, I've been in this startup community for a few years. And from my Station Houston days, I remember we once did this demographic study of Houston founders, and at least in the Station Houston founder community, the average age was 41 years old. So to me, that signals mid-career professionals. And in terms of, with my investor hat on, that means, at Plug and Play, we've met a lot of founders here in Houston, and they're actually working on industry problems that they've seen, and they have a great idea and, are solving it. And so that's a great, recipe for making good investments. And so I'm really excited that Plug and Play is here because we're actually helping entrepreneurs who are solving problems versus having a hammer and trying to find a nail to hit it.
Very good. A question for you, John. Can you expand a bit on what are some unique advantages that the Houston region provides to startup companies?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a few of them. So similar to Pyle's story of their sort of feasibility study, we take a look at a lot of things when we open up a new location, and one of those is the knowledge base that exists in a city. So as I mentioned in my opening comments, right, we run the accelerator. We have a number of other programs that we do, but all of that comes back to the nucleus of having a really engaged volunteer expert base. I should mention we're also a nonprofit, and we don't take any equity from our startups, which is super weird. But it works for us. And so all of our experts are volunteers, right? They give their time, their effort, their energy. So that exercise that we go through, we map out the knowledge base that exists within geography like Houston, and then determine how we can orient that knowledge base towards startups to help them grow and develop. So some things that we came across there were Houston has a lot of legacy industries, major industries with a lot of historical knowledge. Which means two things. One, that knowledge can be transferred to startups in a very meaningful, very impactful way. But also one of the things that's super unique about Houston is you can gain access to that knowledge, like that, the problem sets, not just the customers and the investors, but we teach our startups so often that you have to be in love with the problem, right? Not just the solution. And that requires being really close to the people that are on the front lines of that problem. So to me, that's one of the more unique aspects about Houston is we have so many different industries that are facing similar problems in different environments. And there's a lot of cross-pollination of underlying technology. There's a ton of knowledge here, a lot of access to those people and to the problem sets that exist that you can't really find in other parts of the country. I think the other thing that's super unique is, Houston's a very international city. And some of the work that we did early on when I was at the partnership, we worked with the Startup Genome Project to map out our ecosystem along with others. One of the things that always stood out to me from some of that work is their report they published, I think it was in 2019. They interviewed, I think it was over 10,000 startups. And they tracked their growth and their progress as they interacted with the ecosystem. What they found is that startups that had an international perspective early in their development cycle, they were selling to international markets, or they were building products for international customers. They were over 2.5 times more likely to be successful. It was the one metric that tended to move the needle the most in terms of startup outcomes. So that international perspective that we can bring in and again, sort of cross-pollinate that perspective from not just geographies, but industries, I think is incredibly valuable. And we've seen that play out in our programs over the last year or two.
Very good. So just kind of continuing with that, with the cross-pollination, just curious, how closely do you work with the region's higher education institutions and established corporate entities?
Yeah, so very closely, I would say closer with the corporates than we do with the universities. We kind of put them in two different buckets. So, more directly, the universities are producing some great talent. So as we bring our startups in, and I should mention that we run really large cohorts for an accelerator. We had 54 startups join us this year in Houston. We just wrapped up our summer accelerator. Next year, that'll likely grow to around 70 to 80. And they come in from all over the world. So this year they came in from 13 different countries. And these tend to be early stage companies, several employees on board, but growing very rapidly. So we work closely with the universities for talent for them, talent acquisition, and helping folks come out of university and maybe find a different path than going straight into a corporate or a consulting firm. Nothing against them, love those folks, but I think startups are more fun. The other thing we like to work closely with universities on is understanding what R&D is getting funded there. That for us tends to be an early indicator of where corporate innovation is going to go in the next couple of years. And so we gauge our programming and how we focus our support for industries around some of that. On the corporate side, it's really twofold, and there's probably a bunch of subcategories under there, but we work really closely with them because they make up the majority of the base of our expert pool. So not only gaining access to their knowledge and some of the problem sets they have, but allowing them to take some of that knowledge that they learn from the startups back into their organization is we found to be a really great partnership. And then similar to the R&D aspect, we work closely with them to understand what trends are going to really affect the business community over the next 2 to 5 years so that we can establish programming around those trends and attract innovation from all over the world to either work on the underlying technology or to be sort of an answer to that direct problem that we're seeing.
Very interesting. All right, well, the next set of questions is more focused on the funding and investment area. In the last 5 years, we've seen a steady growth of the volume of venture capital funding. In fact, in 2019, it was a record year for funding in the region. The Houston companies raising $600 million in venture capitals, which I mentioned earlier. As the first female venture fund in Houston, Stephanie, can you share your unique perspectives on the region's startup ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you, Krisha, for that question. And I would echo everything that John and Pael have said about this being an incredibly welcoming community. I think our wildcatter backgrounds is it's okay to fail here. And there really is an openness towards innovation and tech. 85% of our investors at the Artemis Fund are from Houston, and they tend to come not from the venture space, but from oil and gas and real estate and from traditional foundations that otherwise have done philanthropy. So I think there really is an openness and interest for venture capital here, both locally and then also welcoming it from outside of Houston. I think a lot of those numbers have been based on the efforts of GHP and Houston Exponential and the founding of the HX Venture Fund to bring those venture funds to Houston to say, what's happening here? There's something magical happening in Houston and they want a piece of it. And so I think, and that magical piece is a renewed interest in collaborating. So in both of my hats, at both Houston Angel Network and Artemis, we reach out to the groups like Mass Challenge and Plug and Play to look at their deal flow, get actively involved, and help incubate those companies locally, and then build a strong network to the later stage funds outside of Houston. So I think that connectivity both locally and the collaboration is unique, and it's something that's really taken off in the last 5 years. And then the work of Houston Exponential to bring those funds locally to work with us and build out, not just seed capital relationships for the startups, but also A and B and later stage capital as well, because we can't fund all the startups and we can't take them all the way to growth. So we have to have those strong networks. And I've just been overwhelmed with the amount of support from local investors raising capital here for a fund focused on women. I think there's a misconception around all we do is oil and gas and life sciences in Houston. But when you think about what VC backable companies look like, they're tech, they're B2B SaaS, they are highly scalable, and they don't tend to be the capital intensive types of things that we will see corporate venture backing. So I think the connectivity and and the interest in VC is really taking off, and it's an exciting time to be in Houston and Texas in general.
Yeah, just noting that you're not originally from Houston. You've already expanded quite a bit on your experience with raising capital and investing in this region. You have a very well-rounded perspective there. Just opening that up to Payal or John for any other comments around the funding in the region and in general.
Yeah, I guess just, I agree with everything that Stephanie said. One observation that Plug and Play had, so my ventures team is based in Silicon Valley, and one thing that they enjoy about meeting Houston-based founders is valuations tend to be more reasonable than in the Bay Area. So, any venture investors in the audience right now, there's gems to be found. And at least from Plug and Play's perspective, our goal is to make 5 to 10 investments per year. And we'll be tracking to that next year. And then, oh my goodness, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, how embarrassing. I'll pass it over to John.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything that Stephanie and Pyle have said. I think what we've seen just in the startups that have come through our cohorts over the last, the last year, but the last 2 cohorts, we attract a lot of international investment. I think kind of going back to we like companies that are in love with problems, not so much in love with solutions. Like we used to have this saying that like, if you want to build the next grilled cheese delivery app or the iPhone app that puts like sweaters on pictures of your kitten, you can take that to the coast. Like that's not what we do here, right? We build really meaningful tech, things that, are going to send astronauts to Mars, save people's lives, heal us from the pandemic, bring the economy back online. Those really meaningful impact-driven businesses, not just social impact, but things that have a real meaning on the world. We see a lot of that in Houston, and investors, I think over the last couple of years have slowly woken up to that as they've been more comfortable getting out of the coasts. And to Stephanie's point about the HX Venture Fund, I think they've seen over 100 VCs that have come to Houston or shown interest in Houston just through that one activity alone. And as they show up and as they're here and they're experiencing the other incredible funds, the other accelerators, the community that's being built, I think what you're witnessing is a city that has been waiting for industrial innovation to reach the point where they could be adopted at a really high scale. And that probably happened around 2017, 2018. If you're a fan of Steve Case's book, The Third Wave of the Internet, that it happened in 2017, and I happen to agree with that. So over the last year or two, we've seen that sort of machine, that sleeping giant get awoken, where open innovation and external innovation is now a new, not new, but it's newly adopted by more companies in our legacy industries where it wasn't before. And that's just created a mountain of opportunity for startups and for investors alike. And I think people are starting to realize that. So it's a super exciting time to see it all come together.
Yeah. And another observation is, at least, Stephanie, when I joined Plug and Play, one of the first, calls we set up was with other venture investors here locally. And I don't know what it is. It may be something in the water or just Texans being very friendly, but the investors, they share deal flow, and because, it takes a village, and I think we all understand like a rising tide lifts all boats. So just like the friendliness and openness of all these organizations, investors, accelerators, incubators working together, it's, quite magical in a way.
Yeah.
I can't agree more with that. In fact, anytime anyone asks me about what do I love most about Texas, and it's always that, it's the people, it's the community. So I'm with you on that one. Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the discussion on the availability of talent in the region. So despite the global rise in demand for tech talent, many communities are struggling to find talent that is suitable skills. Houston, however, has a high concentration of tech talent that's embedded in energy and the healthcare industries. So a question for you, John, how can the community amplify the message that talent is available and share more about those transferable skills in these industries?
That's That's a good question, but a really tough one. And I'll tell you, I struggle with this because my background before the Great Eastern Partnership was actually in the HR tech space. So I worked for organizations like Career Builder and Monster and some startups in that space. Um, and that's a hard thing for a community to solve for, especially in this day and age, right? Like we're at a point in history where the millennial generation is sort of entering mid-career stage. They demand different things from employers. As employers have navigated Industry 4.0 or third wave of the internet or whatever you want to call it, every company has become a tech company, whether they identify as a tech company or not. Like there is a major tech component to them all. I think the combination of those two things means that a lot of the onus is really on the employees to demand more of their companies and the companies to change some of their, if they still have them, some of their historical recruiting processes to not just look at pedigrees, but to look more at skill sets and people's ability to solve for problems and understand challenges, right? And that's a lot of like the design thinking, lean startup kind of stuff that we teach to our startups as well. So I think that's a big part of it. I think, one of the other problems that we have in Houston is, and GHP probably has a lot more data on this, but we attract a lot of talent from outside of Houston. It's pretty common to walk down the streets in downtown and meet somebody from Dubai, San Francisco, New York, whatever, right? It's not so common to meet those people in those other cities, though, right? So we're sort of become this black hole of talent where people come here and they don't leave. So the word doesn't really get out about how awesome Houston is until they come here for an amazing opportunity. So that's a tough question to answer, right? Like what the community does to do that, other than I would say just get involved and understand the talent that is out here, because there are amazing pockets of it in every industry. And there's a lot of preconceived notions, I think, not just in Houston, but all over the world around the healthcare industry, energy, logistics, manufacturing. But when you look at the innovation labs and the R&Ds of some of these organizations, it's absolutely incredible what they're doing and the amount of brain power that it takes to solve some of these challenges. So I don't know if that actually answers your question, but that's my take on it.
I don't know, but we'll open that also to, but thank you. It is a difficult question, but I'll open it up to Pael and Stephanie if you have any comments to add as well for how the community amplifies the message of the rich diversity of talent that's available.
I think that right now we're in a really interesting time where you don't really need to be. The virtual world has opened up opportunities for, I think, companies should be looking at Houston as a place to place their talent and also a pool to seek talent. So there's something that I would encourage people who are looking to hire to check out called HX Talent. So there's a website where you can post if you're looking for talent within Houston. I think the universities are doing a really great job. There's many new, we have two of the best entrepreneurship universities in the country, U of H and Rice. Rice is always ranked #1 in the graduate program, and U of H just got the #1 undergrad program. There's some really interesting tech that you wouldn't be aware of, talent you wouldn't be aware of too. UH has one of the #1 digital marketing programs in the United States. So there's a lot of talk about, you may not have your #1 headquarters in Houston, but consider your sales and marketing and your digital team in Houston, because there's a ton of talent coming out of U of H. I'm a Rice grad, so please don't hate me, Dean Rodriguez, if you're listening. But U of H is doing a really good job of building up some of that digital talent. You just don't know about it, I think. But right now in a virtual world, there's a great opportunity to be getting the word out, hiring here, where the cost of living is better. Your dollar will go a lot further. Putting your tech team here, the weather's better. So, Pael, did you have something to add?
I mean, I agree with everything Stephanie and John said. There are a high number of highly educated people that work in Houston, given healthcare and energy are big kind of international type of industries that attract, international talent. We have, all the ingredients here in Houston. I think it was either last year or, the late end of 2018, but there was a company called Bill.com that opened up their, second office here in Houston. And that's, just piggybacking off of what Stephanie said, they're based in Palo Alto, but they have, a sales and engineering and marketing office on the west side of town. I think it's at Tech Space. and they're doing really well. So it's a great place for larger technology organizations to set up shop. And then if you're a founder, your dollar will go much farther here in Houston than elsewhere. I'm actually in California right now, and I talk to young people, and they're still living with their parents. So you can have a nice standard of living in Texas for sure.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
know,
so go ahead, John.
I'll say, yeah, one more thought I got onto that I was thinking when Stephanie was talking, that I think is important too, is one of the trends that we've seen just in the last year that Mass Challenge has been operating in Texas. So we work with a lot of corporate partners to understand their open innovation practice, and we help them, as we call it, get startup ready. So we send them almost through an accelerator like we do with our startups. And what we've noticed is that, especially in the legacy industries, a lot of the corporate folks in Houston have they've really started to think of their how they compete on the velocity of innovation. So being able to identify it, create it, and adopt it quicker than their competition is really the kind of become the competitive advantage. And I think with that, a lot of them have realized that open innovation is the best way to go, or external innovation is. So as we've seen them become more receptive to open innovation practices, we've seen not only room for startups to really grow and flourish, but also larger tech companies that are seeing the ability to come in and help solve problems externally. And what that does from a talent perspective is you have people now that are in these legacy industries that understand the problem sets better than just about anybody else, have this great historical knowledge. And some of that talent is now transferring out to these other firms as they come in because they want to be at the forefront of solving that problem. And it's not always as easy or as fast to do it internally, especially as the larger corporates are determining that they need to shift more of that externally to reduce the risk and increase the velocity. So it's an interesting trend we've seen really take off over the last year or two too, which I think will accelerate that talent transfer from some of these legacy industries into some of the more progressive tech-focused organizations that are launching.
Very nice. So it's very interesting just hearing more of all of your thoughts on the diversity of talent, within Houston. But if we focus a little bit more on the diversity just within technology alone, Houston is widely recognized as the most diverse major metropolitan, with 1 in 4 Houstonians being born outside of the U.S. So I'll direct this to Payal, but feel free anyone else to jump in if you want to add to it. But Payal, for you, would you elaborate on how you see the diversity and inclusion as a key asset to the region's growing digital tech and innovation ecosystem?
Yeah, I guess I'll share a personal story as well. Growing up, I always knew diversity is a good thing. I mean, my family were immigrants as well. And then I actually went to grad school in London a few years ago, and I went to a very international program, and I was like, oh, wow, now I see the value of being in an environment with people from, various industries that are all experts in their own field, and they all speak different languages, and they can look at problems in different ways. And then when I moved from London to Houston, I was, in a similar but different way. I was like, oh, we've got, so many different industries here and people from all over the world, and great universities that attract, grad students and undergrads, the smartest people from all over to come here. And it just seems like, a recipe for success. And I think everyone in Houston, we're very open and friendly. And so I remember during times of Harvey, this was a city where, in a time of a natural disaster, people were helping their neighbors no matter, what background they were from. And so that mindset of helping others and then accepting others is a great thing that, we can also, leverage in the community that we have.
Couldn't agree more. Stephanie or John, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just makes simple sense. I mean, it's business sense that diverse perspectives, different backgrounds, not just gender, but, perspectives. I mean, I swear if one more company sends me a a pitch deck with 5 white guys that all went to the same school, I'm going to vomit, right? And I see quite a bit of those, and that's okay. But, you know, you wonder, do they have the diversity of talent and experiences to really solve some of the hardest problems? And yeah, I think it must be an echo chamber in those cases. And that's not really what Houston is, I don't think. And I mean, it just makes sense. We've seen it on the, you know, with the pressure to put more diversity on boards, the companies with, you know, diverse CEOs are outperforming. And I don't think it's just because that person is of a different background or is a different, it's not because they're a woman. It's because that company is open to diverse perspectives and is willing to innovate. I think that permeates throughout the culture. And I think those are the types of companies that will succeed and that we're looking to invest in at the Artemis Fund, for example. Yeah. There's also a stat, the Houston Angel Network over the last 2 years, 50% of all the founders were either of a minority or a woman. And so the investors here are looking for the best talent. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think there's a lot of more data out there that's become more available over the last couple of years that show diverse founding teams, teams with female founders. They're just more likely to be successful, right? Like, I mean, the raw data doesn't lie. They grow faster, they attract more talent, more revenue. I think as a whole, the innovation community globally needs to do a better job of allowing them to attract more venture investment, right? That's still a challenge that we all face. And I think, like, also just as a whole, the structures and the systems that are set up to support innovation ecosystems anywhere in the world are just not oriented towards non-white dudes, right? And that's a problem that people, I think, have been focused on for a little while. And it's one that I'm very happy that at least in Houston, we are level-headed enough to look at the data and say it just makes sense to have these diverse perspectives. And I love Stephanie's comment that it's not just about having a founding team that looks different, but it's about what that says about the founding team. And it's what it says about the organization, that they are open to new ideas. And that's a leading indicator that that's going to be a successful organization, no matter what the economy does, no matter what their market does, right? That's something we try to engineer for at Mass Challenge as well through our open cohorts. And we see a lot of success there, right? We see a lot of success in not just diverse founders and female founders, which we have a lot of, but just getting founders together from different parts of the country, from different industries to view similar problem sets, but through a different lens. It makes everyone far more successful. And I always just go back to the data on this. The data doesn't lie. Diverse teams are more successful. They just are.
And then just piggybacking off of a stat, I believe it was John, you threw it out from the Startup Genome Project, where startups that have a desire to go internationally are 2.5 times more likely to succeed. Well, having a diverse set of employees and perspectives will more likely help you to build a more internationally focused startup as well.
Good. Well, building upon that, around the diversity of Houston's economy, which includes leading positions that go across key global industries like energy, life sciences, manufacturing, aerospace. I'll open up this question to everyone here on the panel. How do you see this manifesting into our startup and innovation ecosystem? So we've level set on where we're at today. How do you see this going forward?
So I'll jump in because I get really excited about this aspect of Houston because there are so many like different industries here, but some of the core problems are consistent across all of them, right? So for instance, this year with our summer cohort that just wrapped up, we launched a space commercialization and a sports tech track. So we're focusing some of our attention on those industries. And while those seem like they're probably two opposite ends of the spectrum, it's really about helping humans perform at their highest potential in harsh environments, which also translates to things like worker safety and a whole host of other things, right? And I think that what's super interesting in some of the learnings we've had from that is the translational technology that underpins most of the major innovation that we'll see over the next 5 or 10 years. It's really a core group of technologies, right? It's really a core group of analytics, material science, human health and performance, things that we do really well in Houston through those various industries. So that part is exciting when you start to see the cross-pollination of the technology. We also see a lot of startups that come to us that maybe are not exposed to a certain industry. So they may come to us as an energy startup or a clean tech startup, but then realize that their technology is actually has a better application on the space station or somewhere else that they never would have thought of. So that's interesting to see new markets open up and new customers open up because we have this sort of like intersection of innovation between all these different industries. And going back to the perspectives and the diversity comment, when you bring all those folks together, you start to realize that these problems can be solved in more places than what maybe is originally thought of.
Yeah, I think that some of the trends that I'm also seeing, it's not just, I think also with everything that happened after Harvey, there's a huge renewed interest in smart cities, property tech. There's a ton of investment going into reimagining the way we think about real estate, commercial real estate, and given the pandemic with people moving out of offices. I think it's important to note that at the Houston Angel Network, for example, you'd think that most of our angel members are executives from oil and gas. They're former, healthcare executives, but there's also a ton of fintech experts and payments. There's quite a few companies that are just under the radar here that are leaders in fintech. There's a ton of great real estate. Here Hines is here now with their innovation program. So I think I'm seeing a lot in prop tech, smart cities, and fintech also burgeoning in Houston as well.
Well, very good. Well, I would like to thank everybody for their contribution. This has been fantastic getting each of your insights into the innovation ecosystem that is here in Houston. And so thank you to each of the panelists. I'll take a moment to transition to audience questions that are being submitted. So it's fantastic. Thank you. Well, I'll start with the first question. This has actually come up many times with the COVID-19 situation, the pandemic. It's led to unprecedented disruptions in economies across the globe. So curious to anyone on the panel that would like to provide any thoughts on the impact to digital technology, to the whole digital technology industry, and how it's been affected.
Yeah, I guess I can kick it off. I would say that tech's actually done really well during all this, right? When you look at the industries that are thriving or that are struggling, tech's been doing great. And so I think that's really exciting, and it's really reassuring to me as a venture investor, right? That now is the time to be investing in the technologies that are going to shape the way we live, we work, we play, we take care of our families. Just like with the recession in 2008, some of the big name companies that we know today started in those times because it's a great opportunity to ride the wave up. I also think that this has started to really put a pressure on the need to be innovative, to make digital transformations. I mean, I think some of our major corporates here are really looking at now's the time to invest in digital transformation. So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing now is the time, if you have the capital, if you have the resources to really look at tech. And we're obviously much harder on our investments and looking at, those that can be stronger coming out of this. But it's definitely now is a great opportunity to be looking at tech as an investment and really to invest in the diversification of Houston and our resiliency as an economy.
Yeah, I just double click and emphasize what Stephanie said about the pandemic. Silver lining of this is large corporations have had to, they had no choice, but they had to do things in a different way. One of my partners here in Houston is Phillips 66, and one of their senior leaders told me they were ready for it, and it just, advanced their digital transformation 10 years. And so when you have organizations like that doing, things differently and are open to it now, that's just, more opportunity for founders to grow by selling into those industries.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there's been two really interesting aspects, which is one, the resiliency of a founder is really tested in a time like this. And so when we think about like what it really takes to be an entrepreneur, like you have to be very quick on your feet. You have to be able to adapt. You have to have systems and processes in place that allow you to react to market conditions very quickly. Not every founder has that. So this to us was a great test to be able to see who's going to be successful and who's not, and who has the mentality to kind of carry their ideas forward. And we've seen that play out this year. So our accelerator, we opened up applications at the end of January. They closed beginning of February. So right at the beginning of the pandemic, but we kicked off the program in July. So obviously these companies changed just wild amounts during that time period. And then even through the accelerator, we just wrapped up now. So to see how they've gone through that pivot, how they've thought about testing, iterating, changing their product, matching market conditions, has been super interesting, and I think has made our startups much more resilient because there is a lot of investment still going into them, just in the right areas, right? I think the other trend that's been really interesting is a lot of our corporate partners have sort of viewed the pandemic in a few phases. It feels like the first phase was very much, there was a lot of investment, a lot of attention on testing, on finding a cure, finding a treatment. Fairly quickly, a lot of the attention switched to, okay, when we go back to a normal world, what is that going to feel like? How do we bring people back into a building safely? And what we started to see is building operators, major employers suddenly became potential customers for a lot of our health tech companies that they never would have thought of before, right? So it opened up a whole new market for a lot of our early stage companies that had some solutions there. And then I think as we think about sort of the last phase of what the new normal ends up looking like, I think we all agree like the world has changed drastically, and it probably will forever. We'll all have, you could call it scar tissue, or you could call it just a new way of thinking about things. But there's going to be some version of virtual engagement in just about every office from here on out. And that, I think, opens up additional opportunities for innovation to happen. And we've started to see that as well. So it's been an interesting time, but to Stephanie's point, the investments have definitely not slowed down. They may have changed which markets they were going into to follow the opportunity. But it's definitely, from our perspective anyways, created a lot of opportunity for innovation and for early stage companies.
Very good. Yeah, so we did have a question come in that is just looking at, kicking things off. So asking what type of information is needed to provide for the request of seed funding.
Go ahead, Payal. I saw you unmute.
So Plug and Play, we just tend to be a very open and founder-friendly organization. In terms of getting in touch with us, you can always just go to our website, and you can even, just request a meeting off of our website. But I would say just knowing someone at Plug and Play, we don't take any equity or charge any fee in working in our accelerator programs. We only take equity if we make an investment, and we're very open to taking meetings. So just find someone. If there's anyone in the audience that wants to meet Plug and Play, send me a LinkedIn message and I'll make an introduction to our ventures teams. I would say it'd probably be good for you to have a pitch deck, and just send that over in the message as well. And that'll help us, start the conversation.
Yeah, I would say the same it depends on the investor and what they're looking for. I would say if you're interested in the Houston Angel Network, go to our website, apply. We have a very comprehensive application. We're also very founder friendly. We don't charge founders to pitch. We never take a piece of their equity. But it's a comprehensive application, and you should be able to answer those questions, or at least have an idea when you come to raise capital. So it's a great education exercise. And so we're looking for a pitch deck. We're looking for projections and pro formas. We are looking, it depends. For the Houston Angel Network, you don't have to have revenues. It can be, really, truly an angel deal. For the Artemis Fund, we are looking for some kind of strong product market fit, meaning you've got people signed up, you've got initial revenues for some proof points, and you're really poised to grow. So it really ranges on the risk appetite for the investor. Always happy to talk more about that, though.
Not an investor, nothing to add, other than I got it.
We want to see that you've went through Mass Challenge or Plug and Play.
Sure, come apply to us. We'll send
Yeah.
you through our program and then apply to Stephanie and she'll give
Yeah,
not
exactly.
guaranteed, but you know.
Very good. Well, I saw a stat recently about the number of tech jobs in Austin being around 162,000, Houston about 227,000 tech jobs. So significant difference. Question there, what can the region do to differentiate in a way that helps companies understand the advantages of having an office here in Houston?
I'll jump in on this one because we have an office. We have a program we run in Austin and some folks there, so we're pretty close to that ecosystem. And as much as I love them, I go back to the comment about creating grilled cheese delivery apps and kitten sweater apps. Like, not to say that they're all like that, but Austin has a very specific type of tech company that they know how to build really, really well. I would say this is true not just for Houston, but for any city. Whether you're a startup or looking to place an innovation group somewhere, you always want to be as close as you can to the problem set that you're trying to solve. You want access to that knowledge base. You want access to the people that are working on the front lines of that problem set. So as we've talked about on this call, right, Houston creates that access to aerospace, logistics, manufacturing, energy, healthcare, some really big, really hard problem sets that exist there. If you are developing video games or in the music tech industry, there's definitely big problems there, and that's probably better suited for something like Austin. We see a lot of consumer packaged goods go to Austin. We see a lot, some enterprise software, but mainly a lot of consumer-facing software go to Austin. And quite frankly, those are things that they can do really, really well because they have that knowledge base and they're close to some of those problem sets. So I think I'm not surprised by the numbers that we have a larger tech industry here. I think it's not as easily seen when you have several hundred people that work on the leading edge of technology, but they're inside of a major oil and gas company. They maybe don't get classified the right way or viewed the right way. So I'm not surprised by that number, but I think the essence here is whatever problem is you're trying to solve, if it has to do with one of those core industries and we can provide some access to that, then that's where you need to be.
Yeah, I've always been baffled by founders who don't want to be close to their customers. So if you have a B2B software company and you're looking to sell into multiple industries, there's a great talent base and a great customer set, in Houston.
Last question I have over here is tech can happen anywhere. We just hit on the whole COVID-19 and digitalization aspects. So at a time when so many are working remotely, why should a company think about the Houston location still being considered? We've already hit a little bit on that, being closer to the problems and being integrated, but are there any other additional thoughts in this space?
I think somebody mentioned this earlier, but just the cost of living is insane. Like, especially for a young company, how much further your runway can go from an investor perspective, or just if you're bootstrapping, to be able to buy an extra 6 months just by being in the middle of the country versus on the coast is an absolute game changer if you're an early stage company. I think the other thing too is, like, we are in a very virtual world right now, but that's for a short period of time. It's who knows how short of a period of time, but at some point that this virtualness will end, right? And I go back to the old, I think it was the Ford saying of, if you asked people what they wanted, it would have been a faster horse, but he built a car. Like, it's one thing to be close to your customers. It's another thing to be able to go on site and get access and understand what their problems are and build solutions that are going to be really meaningfully create impact, right? As opposed to just having conversations over little tiny black boxes on a computer and trying to figure out if we've engineered the right thing here. So at some point that's going to be incredibly valuable. I think that's going to happen a lot quicker than, well, I hope it happens a lot quicker than we anticipate.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, John. And I think to add on to that, I would say the wind is at Houston's back, right? Like, we are a growing city. People are moving here. When I came from Washington, D.C., to visit. I felt like this is a city of opportunity. It's not one of those mature markets where it's too expensive. You know, you have to know someone to get in the door. People are open, and it's a great time to get in on the ground floor of Houston. I mean, there's so much changing even since I came here 5 years ago. And I think in 5 years, I'll look back again and say, man, I can't believe we did that. I can't believe we really changed the face of Houston. And so I think it's something awesome to be a part of, right?
Yeah, I agree with everything John and Stephanie said. The only thing I would add is just, I don't know what it is about Houston, but we're just a very business friendly city and we're very commercially oriented. So if you're wanting to grow a business here, like, you know, this is a place that will embrace you if you're trying to build something.
Yeah, there's no state tax, by the way. That's awesome.
You know, I thought of something too while you guys were talking. There was a phrase I used to hear growing up in Houston that I think sums up Houston well, which was "Don't talk about it, be about it." And I think that one of the things that like has always struck me about this town and all my travels is that if you show up and you do what you say you're going to do, like you can do whatever you want, right? And that's not the case in a lot of cities, right? There is a culture here that goes beyond just being, you know, Southern hospitality, welcoming and friendly. If you show up and you want to solve a problem and you've got a real thought on how to do that, like people are willing to help, right? Like we sort of all have this shared mission of pushing humanity forward on some level, right? And so there's not a lot of hot air, right? There's not a lot of talk about things that you would hear on other parts of the country, on the coast maybe. It's very, very much real talk.
I couldn't agree more. You know, it definitely is a culture of let's roll up our sleeves and let's work together. Let's make progress. So really appreciate everybody's perspectives, the entire panel. This does bring us to a close for today's Houston Industry Series. So again, wonderful panelists that joined today. We look forward to continuing the momentum and growing Houston's innovation ecosystem. As you probably heard, as we were going through this discussion, the Greater Houston Partnership and the Houston business community is very focused on recruiting digital tech companies to relocate or grow their operations here in the Houston region. So I hope that today's discussion has made it clear that these businesses are not only welcoming in Houston, but also we have the resources and the connections to thrive. If you have any questions about doing business or expanding in Houston, we encourage you to reach out to the Greater Houston Partnership so that they may provide any business or location assistance that would be necessary. So with that, on behalf of myself and our panelists and the Greater Houston Partnership, I thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks, Krisha.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Misha.